Well, one of my grander adventures, Carolyn took me to Europe. Well, I mean, I accompanied her to Europe. Now, I paid my own way, so let's, get that. Don't be people thinking, hey, she gave him something she didn't give me. No, I paid my own way, but I went with her, and she invited me to, and it cost a lot of money, but it was worth it. It was a great adventure. Carolyn would go out with me if I and show me the sights and all that, but then she would get tired and she'd have to go back to the room, she'd have to rest, and then I'd be out on my own for about the other half of the day, and then well into the night when I'd come home around 4 or 5 in the morning, sleep a few hours, and go out and do it all again. Um, but and she gave me this book, uh, Europe on $5 a day, maybe it was up to $10 a day, whatever it was out of print because trust me, I could not do anything um, for whatever that book told me I could do and all that. But I was going through it, at one point I was going down to see where they process the most amount of escargot, and this mountain of snail shells and snail meat and all that. One other thing that was in the book was a place called H.N.'s, which is where it was a tattoo parlor. And, this was like 1984, 85. Tattoos were, I mean, I played a lot of pool, so the guys I played pool with had all these tattoos. So I decided I was going to get a tattoo, and had mentioned it to her. I don't know if she really thought I was going to. Anyway, so I went down and I came back that day and I said I got a tattoo. Of course, it's important to remember that only real men got tattoos back then. Um, so then Carolyn goes, "Oh my God, your mom is going to kill me," and then she says, "You could get hepatitis from that," and so I said, of course, what real men would say when faced with such a dilemma. What's hepatitis? Yeah. So then she told me, and I said, okay, well, they gave me these instructions, how to care for it. So we unfolded the instructions, and of course, they're written in French because no one I ever encountered down there spoke a word of English. Um, so it was a rush off to the apothecary to see the pharmacist and get instructions on how to care for what he referred to as the wound. Um, Luckily, he told me about the whole thing about it kind of, whiting out and scabbing over. Otherwise, when that happened the next day, I would have probably pretty much been sure I was dying and would have had to visit to the hospital and all that. Uh, but, the wound was cared for and all was well. My mom had an absolute cow when she found out about it later on. Carolyn was supportive of it, although I may have surprised her that I actually really did it. Um, so I was the first one in the family to have a tattoo, well ahead of this curve everybody having them nowadays. Um, and for those of y'all wondering where said wound is, it was not a particularly comfortable 11-hour train, boat, and bus ride that I had from Paris to London. I stood most pretty much all the way. So it's a funny story getting it. Maybe another day we'll talk about that one. You know, probably in my life, I've studied some of the great, philosophers, both East and West. Um, About meaning of life, why we're here, what is love. Um, you know what love is? Love is driving from Birmingham to Alabama to take your nephew down to the Rialto, the old Rialto down at Forsyth and Lucky Street, and watch triple action kung fu, 4.5 hours, back to back kung fu movies. Um, because, first I wasn't old enough to drive to start with, um, and second, they were all R-rated, so I couldn't get into them. But she would drive there. She would take me there. We would go to Triple Action Kung Fu there. We also went to Triple Action Kung Fu in Birmingham, and she sat through them and claimed she liked some of them, most of them. Um, We did have an agreement, though, because there was always this R-rated section that would always come up in stupid little 4 or 5 minutes of the nudity and whatever that seemed to have to be thrown in there for whatever reason. I think it's just part of the formula of making those silly movies back then. But when it would come up, I would used to say, "Here comes the R part," and she would put her hand up, in front of my eyes. Um, and I think at first she would go to the bathroom, but then she decided, in later subsequent viewings to just cover my eyes was probably um, a more responsible thing to do, I guess. Uh, and I don't think I really, to me it was okay because I can't even imagine how many shades of red I would have turned, sitting next to my aunt when those scenes came up. So, and I was just there for the karate anyway. Um, but yeah, that's real love, guys. Triple action kung fu. Sitting through that for your nephew. Um, I pretty much sums it all up when you think about her. And while I'm thinking about it now, there is a corollary to the triple action kung fu because there was reciprocation. Later in life. This was well into late teenage years and all that. I did go to movies that she wanted to see too. Um, and there was always one that she always brought up specifically. She was always a big uh, Paul Newman and Robert Redford fan, and I went with her to see Out of Africa. I think it might have been Redford and Meryl Streep. Uh, Other than that Reds movie with Warren Beatty, this was like the longest movie in history. Um, oh, I mean, through the whole thing, I was like, I mean, I, and she knew this. She knew that I slept through much of the movie. I just could not get into that one. And the funny thing is that like probably a week, no more than a week and a half um, before her passing, Out of Africa was actually on DirecTV, and I was flipping through the channels, and there was nothing to watch in the 9,000 channels that we have here. So there sat Out of Africa, and I clicked on it. There's that movie I went with Carolyn that she always says I endured so much pain watching with her. So I clicked it on, and I started watching it, and the next thing I knew, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'd fallen asleep on the couch again. So I really don't know that much about even what that movie is about. I just can't seem to make it through that one. But I did. For all those years of triple action kung fu, I did sit through Out of Africa. All right, this is already getting probably way longer than I ever really envisioned it. But, I think I could probably sit here and talk for days on it. Um, when I first started doing this, I thought I was really doing it for other people and all that. And my way of not being there and delivering the eulogy, which I wanted to do. I now realize that I did this for me. The last couple of stories that I can think, one was, remember one time Carolyn announced to us that she was going to thinking about getting married. Um, and, I was 11, 12 at the time maybe. And I said, "You wouldn't dare." Um, and so she always liked to tell that story because she thought it was funny. But, I didn't really say it necessarily to be funny. I mean, I didn't mind being funny, but, it was just in those brief seconds, someone might take her away from me. Might not have, my friend, my mentor, my big sister, my second mom. And yeah, I think the guy's name was Bob. He actually came over to the family and met us I thought it was kind of strange because I think he was older than her, and usually she related to people younger. Um, but he came over to me. He was a really nice guy. Um, Later, I saw a photo that someone had taken of there, and there was me sitting down at the end of the couch, just kind of slumped way back and really quiet. I mean, I was a quiet kid anyway, but I couldn't say anything. I was frozen um, during that visit. This notion that she might marry someone, move away, have her own family. Um, just it was an incredibly selfish act. Um, but but an honest response, to how I felt about her and stuff like that. I was trying to think, so all the good times. Certainly, she must have been mad at me at some point in time. Um, and I thought, not really that I could think of. And then I remembered there was the trip that she took Michael and I to Florida on, and on the way back, we stayed at a hotel that had like these big, huge putting greens, and they were like all over the place in between the different buildings there. And of course, I was a big putt-putt golf fan, so I mean, I wanted to putt on these things because I mean, the whole thing going to Florida and the beach and stuff like that really wasn't my whole thing. But, this was like, but I mean, I went and we had a good time, but I mean, this was like golf. I was going to play golf, putt at least. So I went up to the office, and of course, they didn't have any putters. And I went down to one of the local golf courses, and they wanted like a fortune for a ping putter, which I thought was really kind of ugly anyway. So I wasn't going to spend the little bit of money that I had on that. So I went next to like this Woolworth type little thrift store type thing and all that to see if maybe I could find a cheap putter to buy there. They didn't have it, and so I bought a sleeve of ratty old golf balls and a hammer. Um, and yes, even at that age, I was still like 6 foot tall. So there was this tall, lanky, skinny as could be kid out there on the greens, putting golf balls with this little hammer. And no one like took pity on me and said, "Here, kid, I've got a putter you could use." And certainly, you would think there might have been some people there who had their clubs with them and all that. So I sat out there for hours putting with that um, hammer and that golf ball, putting for so long that it appeared that I had forgotten my obligation to be back to the room at a certain time. So Carolyn and Michael were starving and they wanted to eat. So they came out looking for me. And I guess she was really, really peeved with me at the time. So she came up and she saw me from behind and she screamed out, "Your name is Mud." Uh, but much, much louder and madder than I'm going to give you on the tape here. Um, so, I mean, she was probably about as mad as she could get, I guess, at me. Turns out it wasn't me. It was just some other guy who had longish hair. He turned around and started laughing at her. And, and they had to, it was like a big apartment complex, like building after building after building with all these different putting greens. So after they finally found me, the embarrassment of having done that, had kind of worn off. So, she was still mad. She just couldn't be quite as mad because she also had to tell me the story about what she had said to that guy and how embarrassed she had been about it and all. So somewhere out there is someone who took one, good Samaritan who took one for the team. So that's about as mad as I could remember her ever getting at me. I don't think it really ever happened. Now on the way home, Michael got mad because we were coming home and she wanted to know which way to go on 285, and I said we go this way, and Michael said we go that way, and so instead of ending up where we ended up in Marietta, far from home, Uh, I mean, we've only been driving back and forth to Birmingham forever. And first off, in I mean, she took my advice on directions. This is a guy who got into the car after driving back and forth to Birmingham for 20 years with my parents, um, and took a wrong right turn on 20. Now, it was raining and dark at the time, and I didn't realize I turned wrong until I saw the sign that said "Welcome to Mississippi." Um, so, I mean, in defense, anybody that's going to take my advice on directions pretty much gets what they deserve. Yeah, I'm sure I could have a lot more to say. And like I said, this was done more for me than anything else. So, just in closing, um, Carolyn Dunbar, my favorite aunt, big sister, second mom, mentor, fan, friend. Um, Rest in peace. And thank you for everything.